Welcome to the deep dive. Our job is to take complex source material, distill the absolute essence, and deliver the insights that genuinely stick with you.
And today, we are really getting into a foundational piece of work.
We're undertaking a deep dive into Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. I mean, this is one of the most essential books ever written about human psychology.
It's not an exaggeration to say that. Frankl was, not only a Holocaust survivor, but an internationally renowned psychiatrist.
Yeah.
He founded what's called the Third Viennese School of Psychotherapy, Logotherapy.
And the book's reach is just staggering. Millions of copies sold. So our mission today is to trace that journey. We want to understand how his personal experiences, during the absolute dehumanization of the Nazi concentration camps, how that didn't just validate his theory, but actually birthed it.
That's the key. The context is everything. The book is really structured as proof. Part one is this searing autobiographical testimony. That's the validation.
And part two is the theory itself, logotherapy. So if we strip away all the layers of life, all the comforts, all the certainties, what is left? I think the core question we're trying to answer is the same one Frankl faced.
How does a person, stripped of literally everything, possessions, identity, freedom, still find a reason to keep going?
It's the ultimate psychological challenge.
It is. And to really get the power of logotherapy, we have to start where he did. We have to understand the reality that created it.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the transport, that horrific moment of arrival. Frankl talks about this first psychological phase being shock, defined by something he called the delusion of reprieve.
Right. The human mind just it couldn't process it. They arrive at Auschwitz in these cattle cars, and then they see this tiny detail that gives them this sudden false hope.
What was it?
They saw a group of prisoners already in rags, but they looked well-fed. Some were even laughing.
They're the receiving squad, right? Kind of elite group.
Exactly. But the new arrivals, they just clung to that image. Maybe the rumors about gas chambers aren't true. Maybe we can survive this.
And that delusion just evaporates almost instantly.
At the selection, you have this SS officer just casually performing what Frankl called the finger game.
A flick of the wrist?
Just a flick of the wrist pointing right or left. And 90% of those new arrivals were pointed to the left.
To the crematorium.
Yeah. And the cruelty of it. He mentions that the door to the building often had the word bath written over it in different languages.
It's a total erasure of the person. From that moment, you weren't you anymore. You were a number. Frankl became 119,104.
And that first phase, it has this one culminating point for him. Frankl, he was a psychiatrist. He had managed to smuggle in his life's work, a scientific manuscript hidden in his coat.
He's trying to hold on to his past life, his identity.
He is. And he asks a veteran prisoner, can I save this? Yeah. And the prisoner's response.
Just one word. Shit.
That one brutal word. That was the moment he knew. Everything he'd achieved, it was all just meaningless baggage now.
So once that past life is completely struck out, the second phase begins, apathy.
Apathy, yeah. And this wasn't simple exhaustion. He calls it an emotional death. It was a necessary defense mechanism.
Just survive.
Right. The inner life just regresses to the most primitive instincts. Prisoners would just dream about basic things like a piece of bread or a slice of cake.
And this survival came at a terrible price. He writes about this brutal internal self-selection process.
It's just devastating. He notes that the people who often survived for years were the ones who had lost all their scruples, the ones willing to betray someone or use violence.
His summary is unforgettable. The best of us did not return.
And that is the context that makes the moments of defiance, these inner spiritual moments, so incredibly powerful.
In a system designed to crush your will, how do you even begin to sustain an inner life? He answers that with Nietzsche.
He who has a why to live can bear with almost anyhow.
It all comes down to that.
Frankl argues that spiritual freedom was the last thing they couldn't take. He remembers marching for miles in the freezing dark, stumbling, barely conscious, and focusing his entire mind on the image of his wife.
That could sound like just a distraction or even a delusion, since he had no idea what happened to her. How did he see that as a source of meaning?
Well, he realized in that moment that her physical presence didn't matter. The real meaning was in the contemplation of love itself.
So not just his love for her, but love as a concept.
As an ultimate human fulfillment, yeah. He writes, "The salvation of man is through love and in love." And he realized he could achieve that fulfillment even there, in utter desolation, just by keeping that spiritual reality alive inside.
So it's about actively choosing to find value, even when you're surrounded by horror. He mentioned seeing a beautiful sunset over the Bavarian mountains.
Or hearing a fellow prisoner play a sad tango on a violin in the hut. These were tiny little fragments of normal life, and he called them a soul's weapon against despair.
And humor, too. He talks about inventing funny stories about what they would do when they were liberated.
A kind of gallows humor. It creates distance, it preserves the self.
So this all boils down to the ultimate freedom he identifies. That even under total external control, they could not take away the ability to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances.
Exactly, that inner decision. That's what determined whether you kept your human dignity or just became a plaything of circumstance. It's the way you choose to bear your suffering that gives it meaning.
But I have to ask, because I think this is a point where people can get stuck, isn't there a danger in finding meaning in suffering?
Yeah.
That it might encourage people to just accept terrible situations?
That is a crucial question, and Frankl is incredibly clear about this. He explicitly says that suffering for no reason is masochistic, not heroic.
So if you can change it, you should.
Always. If the cause is political or biological or psychological, the only meaningful action is to treat and remove the cause. The meaning found in suffering only applies when that suffering is truly, absolutely unavoidable.
When the only thing left is your attitude toward it.
Precisely.
And that clarification, I think, brings us right to the system that was born from this experience, logotherapy.
Right. Logotherapy is meaning-centered psychotherapy. It's focused on the logos, which is Greek for meaning. And this is where he makes a huge pivot from his predecessors in Vienna.
Okay, so if we look at, say, Freud, the main driver is the will to pleasure. For Adler, it's the will to power. But Frankl comes in and says, no, man's primary motivation is something else.
It's the will to meaning. And this is a critical distinction.
Why is this so important?
Because Frankl saw that pleasure and power were often just substitute goals.
Yeah.
If your primary drive for meaning is frustrated, what do? You try to fill that hole by chasing money or power or pleasure.
So those things aren't the engine, they're just attempts to compensate for a stalled engine.
You got it. The will to meaning is fundamental, not some secondary thing.
And when that engine stalls, you get what he called the existential vacuum.
It's such a powerful term for this feeling of deep inner emptiness, of meaninglessness. Frankl said modern life created this twofold loss. We lost the animal instincts that used to guide behavior.
And we've also lost the strong traditions and values that used to guide us.
So now we don't know what we have to do. We don't know what we ought to do. The result is often this deep, pervasive boredom.
And that boredom, that vacuum, it shows up in his practice. He estimated something like 60% of his American students felt a sense of meaninglessness.
And we see it everywhere today, right? Burnout, aggression, addiction. Scrolling on our phones for hours, they're all just attempts to distract from that inner emptiness.
So logotherapy doesn't tell you what your meaning is. It just gives you a framework to discover it. And he outlines 3 main ways to do that.
Yeah, 3 avenues. The first one is pretty straightforward. It's through creative work or a deed, achieving something, building something.
The second is by experiencing value or encountering someone in their uniqueness.
And love is the highest example here. Frankl says love is the only way to really grasp the core of another person. But it's more than that. When you love someone, you help them see their own potential.
So you help them actualize it. Love creates meaning.
It reveals possibilities for both of you.
And then there's the third avenue, which connects directly back to his experiences in the camps, the attitude toward unavoidable suffering.
This is the most difficult one. If you absolutely cannot change your fate, then accepting it as your unique task, that transforms it. The suffering itself becomes an achievement because of the attitude you bring to it.
He uses that incredibly moving example of the elderly doctor mourning his wife.
Yes, the doctor was just devastated by his loss. But Frankl helped him reframe it. He asked him, what would have happened if you had died first?
And his wife would have had to suffer this loss.
Exactly. So by surviving her, he had spared her that pain. His suffering became an act of sacrifice. It was imbued with meaning.
It's a fundamental shift. Meaning isn't something you find out there, it's something you actualize inside.
It's about response and responsibility.
And Frankl wanted practical tools, not just philosophy. He developed a key technique, especially for things like anxiety and OCD, called paradoxical intention.
It's brilliant in its simplicity. It's based on the idea that fear often causes the thing you're afraid of.
So the fear is the mother of the event.
Right. So if you have a terrible fear of sweating in public, the logotherapist encourages you to go out and intentionally try to sweat as much as you possibly can.
Or if an insomniac is terrified of not sleeping, they're told to try their best to stay awake all night.
The goal isn't really to succeed, it's to break the cycle. By intending to do the very thing you fear, you create distance, you introduce humor, and you remove the desperate need not to do it.
You neutralize the fear itself.
You do.
So if we pull all of this together, the freedom in the camps, the will to meaning, these three avenues, we arrive at his concept of tragic optimism.
Tragic optimism is this philosophy of saying an unconditional yes to life, even when you're facing what he called the tragic triad.
Suffering, guilt, and death.
Suffering, guilt, and death, or transitoriness. Logotherapy says life is potentially meaningful under all conditions, no matter how miserable.
And that idea of transitoriness, that our lives are finite, that's often seen as the source of meaninglessness. But Frankl argues the complete opposite.
He says it's what makes us profoundly responsible. Because every single moment, once it's lived, is immediately stored in the past. So we're challenged to make the best choice now, before that possibility is gone forever.
He has that great calendar analogy. The pessimist sees the pages shrinking, feels their time running out.
But the optimist sees those pages being filed away, not as lost potential, but as realities that have been saved irrevocably.
These are the assets of the past. Deeds done, loves loved, and sufferings bravely suffered.
Exactly. No one can take those away from you. This is the profound resource that the elderly possess, and it gives every life, no matter how long, an unconditional value.
Which brings us to the final essential truth of his work. The unconditional value of every single person, independent of their usefulness or their condition.
And his final summary is, well, it's the most difficult and maybe the most inspiring part of the book. He reminds us that man invented the gas chambers of Auschwitz. That's the depth of human evil.
But man is also the being who entered those same chambers upright, with dignity.
With a prayer or a spiritual conviction on his lips, that capacity for spiritual freedom and defiance, that is the final measure of what it means to be human.
So the ultimate takeaway from this deep dive, the lesson Frankl wants you to carry forward, is this fundamental shift in attitude. We have to stop asking, what can I expect from life?
And we have to replace it with the much more profound and challenging question.
What does life expect from me?
And that reframing is why this is also vital today. When you see that existential vacuum showing up as depression or aggression or addiction, the cure isn't a quick hit of pleasure or more power. The remedy is finding the concrete, unique task that life is asking of you and then fulfilling it.
If Frankl's idea about transitoriness is true, that every choice you make is stored in the vault of the past forever, then here's a final thought for you to carry forward. Frankl's own moral imperative. Live as if you were living for the second time and had acted as wrongly the first time as you were about to act now.